The galaxy turned its back. Humanity intervened with force. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless stars, planets, and species, all living under the watchful eyes of the Galactic Council. The Council was made up of representatives from the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, a group that prided itself on maintaining peace and stability across the stars. They were supposed to be the guardians, the protectors of life, stepping in when things went wrong. But for all their power and influence, the Council was slow to act, slow to decide, and that hesitation cost lives. Veloria, a once thriving planet located on the outer edge of the galaxy, was about to become the next casualty of that slowness. The planet had fallen victim to an invading alien empire, the Vakar. The Vakar were ruthless conquerors, a race with technology far beyond that of Veloria, and they took advantage of the planet's weaknesses without mercy. The Velorians, a peaceful people, had been caught off guard. Their resistance was brave, but it was no match for the invaders' advanced weaponry and cunning strategies. As the Vakar tightened their grip on Veloria, the people fought back with everything they had. They sabotaged supply lines, organized guerrilla tactics, and sent out a desperate plea for help, sending their distress signal into the void of space, hoping against hope that someone would come to their aid. But the Galactic Council, concerned with its own political struggles, ignored the signal. They saw the Velorians as a small, insignificant species, unworthy of the Council's precious time. After all, there were far more pressing matters at hand. New trade routes, economic negotiations, and even power struggles between the Council's major factions. To them, Veloria's plight was just another inconvenience in the grand scheme of the galaxy. The Velorians, isolated and without hope, saw their cities fall one by one. Families were torn apart, and the once beautiful planet turned into a battlefield of destruction. The invaders didn't care who they killed or what they destroyed. Every day, Veloria's people died, caught in the crossfire of an endless war. The humans watching from far away, however, saw something different. Humanity had always been an outlier in the galaxy. They were not part of the Galactic Council, not part of the delicate political games that controlled the galaxy's fate. They had their own issues to deal with on Earth, but something about Veloria's plight stirred something deep inside them. It wasn't just the human drive to survive, it was the need to protect, to stand up for the powerless. The distress signal reached Earth days after it was sent, and it was unlike any the humans had received before. The signal was desperate, raw, filled with the cries of a species fighting for its life. It wasn't just a call for help, it was a plea for survival. Commander Catherine West, a seasoned leader of the United Earth Armed Forces, was one of the first to receive the message. As she listened, she felt the weight of the decision on her shoulders. She knew that once Earth intervened, it would not be a simple act of diplomacy or aid. This would be a war, and humanity would be at the center of it. West didn't hesitate. She knew what had to be done. Earth could not stand by while an entire planet was being crushed under the boot of an alien empire. There would be no negotiations, no peace talks. The Vakar had to be stopped, and humanity would be the ones to do it. Within hours, Earth's leaders had been informed of the situation, and the decision was made. The United Earth Armed Forces would send a fleet to Veloria. Ships, soldiers, and everything needed for a full-scale intervention were readied. Earth wasn't just offering help, they were preparing to take the fight directly to the Vakar. The fleet consisted of ships that humans had spent years developing. The fleet was not large by galactic standards, but it was more than enough for the job at hand. Each ship was equipped with powerful weapons, advanced shields, and the best human technology had to offer. But it wasn't just the machines that made humanity's military formidable. It was the soldiers, the men and women who had trained for this kind of mission their entire lives. They were warriors, not diplomats or peacekeepers. They didn't negotiate, they fought. General West was assigned to lead the mission. She was no stranger to war. Having fought in numerous conflicts across Earth's colonies, she had seen firsthand the horrors of war, but she also understood what made humanity different. They were relentless. They didn't back down. And when a fight was worth fighting, they fought to win. As the fleet assembled, West addressed her troops. "We are not here for politics. We are here because someone needs to stand up for the helpless. We are here because Veloria deserves to be free. And we are here because humanity will not let the darkness of the universe claim another world." The soldiers cheered, and the fleet set off for Veloria. It would take several days for the ships to reach their destination, but in those days, the fate of Veloria was already sealed. The Vakar would not know what hit them. As the fleet entered Veloria's solar system, the first signs of their arrival were noticed by the Vakar. They had no idea who would dare challenge them, but the human ships were impossible to miss. Their heavy weapons, their bold designs, and the unmistakable symbol of Earth emblazoned across their hulls. The Vakar, overconfident and sure of their superiority, had no idea that they were about to face the one force in the galaxy that would not hesitate to do whatever was necessary to win. The human fleet wasn't just about firepower. It was about strategy, precision, and the will to protect those who could not protect themselves. As the human forces neared Veloria, General West and her team began to plan the first strike. They knew the Vakar would be expecting a full-scale assault, but humanity's strength wasn't just in brute force. It was in their ability to adapt, to surprise. West decided to hit fast and hard, landing the first wave of soldiers directly behind enemy lines. There they would sabotage the Vakar's communication networks and supply chains, taking away the enemy's ability to organize a counterattack. "We strike fast, and we hit them where they least expect it," West said to her commanders. "Once we break their control, we'll liberate Veloria, and we'll do it on our terms." The first human soldiers were deployed to the surface of Veloria under the cover of darkness. They moved quickly, stealthily, using their advanced technology to stay one step ahead of the Vakar. They attacked with precision, taking out enemy patrols and destroying key infrastructure without giving the Vakar a chance to retaliate. It wasn't long before the Vakar realized they were facing something far more dangerous than a simple rebellion. The human forces weren't just a threat. They were a storm, unstoppable and unforgiving. As the first days of fighting began, the Velorians, once desperate and alone, began to feel hope. The invaders were no longer the only force on their planet. There was someone else fighting for them, someone who wouldn't give up no matter the cost. And humanity, the ones who had always been outsiders in the galaxy, were beginning to show that they would never turn their backs on those in need. The galaxy might have turned its back on Veloria, but humanity had arrived, and nothing would stop them from seeing it through. The first days of the human intervention were nothing short of chaotic. As soon as the human forces landed on Veloria, the Vakar Empire realized that the situation had drastically changed. The Velorians, long abandoned by the Galactic Council, were now witnessing a new hope, and that hope was humanity. General Catherine West had ordered a swift, direct approach to the conflict. The humans knew that they had to make their presence felt immediately. They couldn't waste any time. Every minute that passed was another minute the Vakar could use to strengthen their hold on Veloria. The first human soldiers to land were deployed deep behind enemy lines, in an area where the Vakar's defenses were weakest. The goal was simple: disrupt the Vakar's communications and logistics, making it difficult for them to coordinate their forces. As the human teams moved through the dense, alien forests and war-torn cities, they quickly realized just how desperate the situation had become. The Vakar's occupation had left the planet scarred. The once beautiful cities of Veloria were now in ruins, their buildings shattered by bombs and gunfire. The streets were littered with debris, the smell of smoke and burning flesh heavy in the air. The Velorian people, once proud and independent, now cowered in the shadows, terrified of their invaders. But despite the overwhelming destruction, there was a glimmer of hope. The Velorians, although beaten down, were still fighting. The human forces encountered groups of rebel fighters scattered throughout the ruins, their numbers small but their spirits strong. These rebels had been resisting the Vakar since the invasion began, and now, with the arrival of the human forces, they had found their saviors. As the human soldiers made contact with the rebels, a sense of unity began to form. The Velorians, though hesitant at first, saw the humans not as outsiders, but as allies, people who were willing to risk everything to free them from their brutal occupiers. For the first time in months, they felt the fire of resistance reignite within them. The first few battles were brutal. The Vakar, realizing that they were being flanked by the humans, sent in their full forces to retaliate. The human soldiers, though outnumbered, fought with an intensity and precision that the Vakar hadn't anticipated. Humans were a force to be reckoned with, not just because of their weapons and technology, but because of their unmatched willpower. They fought with everything they had, not just to win, but to protect the innocent, to keep their promise to the Valorian people. General West watched from her command ship as the first major skirmish unfolded. Her soldiers had successfully breached one of the Vakar's key strongholds, and now they were engaged in a fierce battle with the invaders. West knew that every decision she made from here on out could mean the difference between victory and defeat. She wasn't about to let her soldiers down. The sound of laser fire and explosions echoed through the air as the humans advanced. The Vakar were well-trained and well-equipped, but they were unprepared for the brutal efficiency of human tactics. The human soldiers moved as a single unit, each step calculated, each move deliberate. They didn't just fight to win, they fought to end the suffering. One of the soldiers, Corporal David Reyes, was part of a squad tasked with securing a vital communications tower. As they neared the tower, they encountered heavy resistance from the Vakar. Reyes, a seasoned veteran who had fought in countless battles on Earth's colonies, led his team forward, showing no hesitation. The Vakar were ruthless, but Reyes had something they didn't: experience. The humans knew how to fight on their terms. Reyes and his squad breached the tower's entrance, pushing forward through the narrow corridors. The Vakar soldiers were relentless, but the human soldiers were faster, more adaptable. They didn't wait to be attacked. They took the fight to the Vakar, engaging them head-on. After a tense few minutes, the tower was secured. "We've got it," Reyes reported, panting, his voice crackling over the comms. "The Vakar are pulling back, but they're regrouping." General West, listening to the transmission, gave a sharp nod. "Good work, Corporal. Hold that position. We're sending reinforcements." As the day wore on, the human forces gained ground. The Vakar, struggling to regain their footing, began to falter. They had never expected humanity to act with such speed and efficiency. The humans were not only skilled fighters, but they also knew how to leverage their strengths. They adapted to the battlefield, outwitting the Vakar at every turn. But the Vakar were not without their own tricks. As the human forces pushed deeper into Valoria's capital, the Vakar began to deploy heavier weapons, armored war machines, and advanced drones designed for mass destruction. They had not been used in the initial waves of the invasion, but now, with the humans pushing them back, the Vakar resorted to desperate measures. The first of the war machines appeared in the skies over the city, a massive, armored behemoth, its guns ready to unleash devastation. The humans had never faced anything like it before, but they didn't hesitate. They had trained for situations like this. The Vakar had the firepower, but the humans had the willpower. General West gave the order for a full-scale counterattack. "All units converge on the target." "Take it down." The human forces mobilized quickly, coordinating with precision. It was a dangerous gamble. If they failed to disable the war machine, it would level the entire city, killing thousands of innocent Valorians. But failure was not an option. The human soldiers knew what was at stake, and they fought like their lives depended on it. Because, in that moment, they did. A squadron of human fighters took to the skies, engaging the war machine from above. The Vakar fired back with everything they had, but the humans were nimble, moving with lightning speed, dodging blasts and returning fire. Below, the ground forces launched an assault on the war machine's base, targeting weak points in its armor. After hours of intense fighting, the humans managed to disable the war machine. It crashed to the ground with a deafening roar, its weapons silenced. The human soldiers cheered as they saw the machine burn, but they knew this was only one victory in a much larger war. Despite the setback, the Vakar regrouped. They were not done yet. The fight for Valoria would be long and hard, and there would be no guarantees. But the humans had shown them something important. They had the power to turn the tide. They had the power to win. As the day drew to a close, General West stood on the bridge of her command ship, looking out over the battlefield. The Vakar were still holding strong, but they were starting to crack. The humans had fought with everything they had, and it was clear that the Vakar were no longer the only power on Valoria. Humanity had arrived, and they weren't leaving until the planet was free. The Valorians, watching from the safety of the rebel hideouts, began to realize that this was no ordinary rescue mission. Humanity wasn't here just to help, they were here to win. And for the first time in a long while, hope flickered in the hearts of the Valorian people. The war for Valoria was far from over. But with humanity in the fight, the odds had just shifted. The battle for Valoria had entered its second week, and the human forces were slowly but steadily making progress. The Vakar, once confident in their superiority, now found themselves on the defensive. They had underestimated humanity, and that mistake was starting to cost them dearly. General Catherine West stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Resolute watching as the human forces continued their assault on the Vakar stronghold. The fleet had established a foothold on the outskirts of the capital city, but the real challenge lay ahead, the Vakar's main command center, located in the heart of the city itself. "We've pushed them back to the central district," one of her officers reported. "But their reinforcements are coming in fast. We'll need more time to establish a solid perimeter." West nodded, her gaze never leaving the battle unfolding on the monitors before her. She knew that time was running out. The longer they waited, the more likely the Vakar would regroup and launch a counterattack. They had to strike hard and fast. Veloria's future depended on it. "Start moving the ground forces forward," West ordered, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "We need to capture that command center before they can reinforce it. No delays." The command center was a massive structure, a fortress in the middle of the city. It had been heavily fortified by the Vakar, with layers of defenses that would make it nearly impossible to breach. But the humans had come prepared. Their weapons, though not as advanced as those of the Vakar, were designed for precision, not just raw power. They knew how to dismantle an enemy from within. The plan was simple: infiltrate the outer defenses, breach the main gates, and disable the Vakar's command systems. Once the center fell, the Vakar would be left without a clear chain of command, and their forces would collapse under the weight of their disarray. The human forces began moving through the city streets, working their way toward the heart of the Vakar occupation. Every step was a struggle. The city was a war zone: rubble, destroyed buildings, and the occasional distant explosion from skirmishes between human and Vakar troops filled the air. The Velorians, once proud and peaceful, now moved in the shadows, too afraid to come out into the open, but watching in awe as the humans fought to save them. As the human forces closed in on the command center, they encountered fierce resistance. The Vakar had fortified every street, every building, and every possible point of entry. They knew the humans were coming, and they were prepared to make their stand. But what the Vakar hadn't prepared for was the human ability to adapt. Sergeant Emily Cross led a squad of soldiers through the streets, their movements swift and precise. She had been on the front lines of many conflicts, but this one felt different. The Velorians were counting on them. There was no room for failure. "This is it, team," Sergeant Cross said, her voice low but steady. "We get in, secure the command center, and disable their communications. With a hammer, let's make it count." Her squad nodded, weapons ready. The streets were eerily quiet as they moved through the city, the distant sound of Vakar patrols echoing off the ruined buildings. The squad moved in perfect synchronization, the result of countless hours of training. They were ready for whatever the Vakar could throw at them. As they neared the command center, the first wave of Vakar soldiers emerged from a nearby alleyway. The firefight that followed was intense. The Vakar, though heavily armed, lacked the speed and flexibility of the human soldiers. The humans were faster, more adaptable. They used the city's ruins to their advantage, ducking behind walls and broken structures as they returned fire. Sergeant Cross led the charge, her rifle blasting in quick succession, taking down 2 Vakar soldiers before they could even react. Her squad moved with her, each soldier working in unison to clear the area. The Vakar were outnumbered, but they fought with desperation, knowing that if they lost this battle, the entire occupation would collapse. But despite their resistance, the humans pressed on. They fought with a relentless energy, pushing forward inch by inch. Each step brought them closer to the command center, and the closer they got, the more the Vakar seemed to falter. Their morale was breaking. "We're almost there," Sergeant Cross shouted, her voice filled with determination. "Keep pushing." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the human forces reached the gates of the Vakar command center. The gates were heavily fortified, but the humans had brought their own tools to deal with this. With a few well-placed charges, the gates exploded inward, allowing the human soldiers to flood into the heart of the Vakar's stronghold. Inside, the battle intensified. The command center was a labyrinth of metal corridors and high-tech security systems. The Vakar had anticipated an assault on their headquarters, but they hadn't anticipated how quickly the humans would adapt. Every hallway, every room was a new battlefield, and the humans fought their way through, dismantling the Vakar's defenses with precision. At the heart of the command center, General West led the final push. Her command ship had been overseeing the ground operations, but now it was time for her to lead the charge herself. She and her team fought their way through the heavily defended core of the building, knowing that the future of Veloria rested in their hands. When they finally reached the central control room, they encountered the Vakar's highest-ranking officer on the planet, General Jacker. The Vakar general was waiting for them, flanked by his elite guards, his face a mask of rage and disbelief. "You," Jacker spat, his voice thick with hatred. "Humans, you dare to defy the Vakar Empire?" General West didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, her gun raised and steady. "You should have never come here," West said, her voice cold. "This planet is under our protection now. And if you think you can stop us, you're wrong." The battle that followed was brutal. Jacker's elite guards fought with everything they had, but they were no match for the human soldiers. General West, with her years of combat experience, was a force to be reckoned with. She moved through the chaos like a storm, her weapon never wavering as she took down one guard after another. Finally, it was just her and Jacker. The Vakar general, enraged, charged at West, his weapon raised, but she was faster. With a quick movement, she disarmed him, knocking him to the ground. "You're done," she said, her voice cold but resolute. "This war is over." Jacker, realizing the battle was lost, growled in frustration, but there was nothing he could do. The command center was in human hands, and the Vakar had no way of reclaiming it. With the command center secured, General West signaled to her forces. The Vakar's communications were shut down, their ability to organize their forces crippled. The battle for Veloria was far from over, but the human forces had dealt the Vakar a decisive blow. The tide had turned. Outside, the Velorians watched as the humans emerged victorious, their flag waving proudly over the fallen Vakar stronghold. For the first time in months, there was a sense of peace in the air. The humans had come to save them, and they had succeeded. As the sun set over the ruined city, General West stood tall, looking out over the battlefield. The Vakar were not defeated yet, but they had been humbled. And humanity had proven that when it came to protecting the helpless, there was no force in the galaxy more determined than Earth's warriors. The war for Veloria was far from over, but the Velorians now had something they hadn't had in months: hope. And with humanity by their side, they knew they wouldn't have to fight alone anymore. The war for Veloria had entered a critical phase. General West knew that while they had achieved a major victory by taking the Vakar command center, the battle was far from won. The Vakar Empire was still strong, and their forces, although disorganized, had not been completely defeated. The Velorian capital had been freed, but there were still pockets of resistance. The Vakar weren't ready to surrender, and the fight was far from over. The human forces, however, were undeterred. They had come to Veloria not just to fight, but to win. And to do that, they would need to push the Vakar back completely, break their last strongholds, and send a message to the galaxy that humanity would no longer tolerate the suffering of innocents. The first few days after the fall of the command center were tense. The Vakar still had control of several important military installations scattered across Veloria. These were not just weapon depots or small outposts. They were critical supply hubs that allowed the Vakar to maintain their war effort. If the humans wanted to finish this war, they needed to take these installations down, one by one. General West gathered her senior officers for a briefing. The plan was simple, yet dangerous. They would need to move quickly and decisively, striking at the heart of the Vakar's remaining strongholds. Their forces were spread thin, and the Vakar were known to retaliate with brutal force. West was well aware that if they hesitated, the Vakar might regroup and launch a counterattack. "We have the momentum now," West said, her voice steady. "But the Vakar are not defeated. We have to hit them hard. We take these installations and we break their supply lines. Once that's done, they won't be able to maintain their fight. They'll crumble." Her officers nodded. The plan was risky, but it was the only option they had. The soldiers were ready. They had trained for this moment, and they would give everything to see it through. The human forces set out under the cover of darkness. The Vakar had fortified many of their key installations, but the humans had the element of surprise on their side. The Vakar never expected the humans to move this quickly. With each successful strike, the humans gained more ground, and the Vakar's hold on Veloria weakened. The humans made swift use of their advanced technology, using precision strikes to disable Vakar weapons and communications before the enemy could mount a proper defense. Sergeant Emily Cross, one of General West's most trusted leaders, was in charge of a small but highly trained unit tasked with taking down a key Vakar weapons depot located in a remote region of Veloria. The journey there was difficult, with harsh terrain and constant risk of encountering Vakar patrols. But the squad pressed on, their minds focused on the mission ahead. "We're almost there," Sergeant Cross muttered as they navigated through a dense jungle, keeping their movements quiet and swift. "Stay sharp. We don't know what we'll be walking into." The squad, fully equipped with the latest human technology, moved carefully through the jungle. The thick trees and underbrush created natural cover, but it also made it easy for an enemy to hide. Every soldier kept a tight grip on their weapon, eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of movement. As they neared the weapons depot, the air grew tense. The depot was surrounded by high walls and guarded by Vakar sentries. The humans couldn't afford to make a sound. One slip-up could alert the entire Vakar garrison, and the whole mission would be compromised. Sergeant Cross signaled for her squad to stop. She crouched down, examining the terrain ahead. The depot was guarded by a few dozen Vakar soldiers, all equipped with energy shields and heavy weaponry. The Vakar weren't taking any chances, but neither were the humans. "We take them out quietly," Sergeant Cross whispered, her voice barely audible. "One at a time, we'll breach the gates from the west." The squad split up, moving silently through the jungle. Their training had made them experts in stealth, and they knew the importance of making every shot count. As they approached the walls, they could hear the Vakar talking among themselves, unaware of the danger that was closing in on them. Sergeant Cross gave the signal, and the squad sprang into action. Within moments, the first two Vakar sentries were down, their bodies silent as they fell to the ground. The humans moved quickly, using advanced silenced weapons to take out the guards without alerting the rest of the garrison. Once the perimeter was secured, the squad moved in. They breached the depot's gates, using explosives to blast open the fortified entrance. Inside, they found rows upon rows of Vakar weapons, stored for future use in the war. The depot was an arsenal of destruction, capable of turning the tide in the Vakar's favor if it remained intact. But the squad wasn't here to take the weapons. They were here to destroy them. Sergeant Cross gave the order to plant charges, and within minutes, the depot was rigged to blow. The soldiers moved quickly to get out, knowing that the explosion would be catastrophic. But they also knew that the Vakar could not be allowed to keep these weapons. As they retreated into the jungle, the squad heard the blast echo behind them. The depot exploded in a massive fireball, sending debris flying in every direction. The humans knew they had dealt the Vakar a significant blow. "We've done our part," Sergeant Cross said, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "Let's get back to base." Meanwhile, General West was overseeing the larger strategy. The success of the weapons depot raid had given her confidence, but there was still more to do. The Vakar were losing their grip on Veloria, but they weren't going down without a fight. The final push would require everything the humans had. As the days passed, the human forces continued their assault. The Vakar's remaining installations were systematically destroyed, and the Vakar were forced to retreat into smaller, more defensible positions. The Velorian resistance fighters, inspired by the humans' bravery, joined in the attacks, helping the humans push the Vakar further back. But despite the successes, General West knew that the final battle would be the hardest. The Vakar still held the planet's largest and most well-defended fortress, a stronghold that had been untouched throughout the war. It was a massive, towering structure, surrounded by layers of fortifications and heavy weaponry. The Vakar had poured all their remaining resources into this fortress, and they would not give it up easily. General West knew that this would be the decisive moment. If they could take the fortress, they could end the war. If they failed, the Vakar would have a foothold to regroup and launch a counteroffensive. "We're going in," West said, her voice calm but resolute. "This ends now." The final assault was launched with everything the humans had. The human fleet, along with the Velorian resistance, launched an all-out attack on the fortress. The Vakar fought with everything they had, but it wasn't enough. The humans were determined to finish what they had started. They pressed forward, their weapons blazing, tearing through the Vakar defenses. General West led the charge herself, her determination unmatched. As they breached the fortress walls, the last of the Vakar forces began to falter. The humans moved in, capturing key positions, disabling the Vakar's final weapons and forcing them to surrender. After hours of intense fighting, the fortress fell. The Vakar had been defeated, and Veloria was free. The humans stood victorious, their hard-fought battle bringing an end to the Vakar occupation. The Velorians, once slaves to the invaders, now celebrated their newfound freedom. The humans had not only saved them, they had given them hope for the future. General West stood amidst the ruins of the fortress, looking out over the city. The battle had been won, but the cost had been high. Many brave soldiers had fallen, and the planet had been scarred by the war. But in the end, it had all been worth it. The galaxy would never forget what humanity had done for Veloria. The Vakar were gone, their empire shattered. And the humans, once outsiders in the galaxy, had proven that when it came to fighting for what was right, no one could match their strength and resolve. Veloria was free, and humanity had shown the galaxy that they would never stand idly by while innocent lives were destroyed. They had intervened with force, and they had brought justice to a world in need. The war was over. But humanity's reputation had been forever changed. The battle was over. The fortress, once a symbol of the Vakar Empire's strength, lay in ruins. Its towering walls, battered and torn by the onslaught of human and Velorian forces, had finally crumbled under the pressure of relentless attacks. General Catherine West stood on the rubble-strewn ground, her eyes scanning the horizon as the last remnants of the Vakar's resistance faded away. Victory had come at a steep cost. The human forces had lost many soldiers in the final assault, brave men and women who had fought with everything they had to free Veloria. They had given their lives for something greater than themselves. General West felt the weight of their sacrifice deeply, but she also knew that their efforts had not been in vain. The Vakar were gone, their empire shattered, and Veloria was free. As the last Vakar soldiers surrendered and were taken into custody, the remaining Velorian rebels emerged from their hiding places. They had fought alongside the humans, and now, with the battle won, they looked at the humans not as outsiders, but as saviors, brothers and sisters in arms. The Velorians had been through so much. Their planet had been occupied for months, their people crushed under the boots of the Vakar, but now they were free, they could rebuild, they could live again. General West, a Velorian leader, approached, his voice filled with gratitude. "We can never thank you enough. You and your people have saved our world." West gave him a nod, her face weary but resolute. "It was not just my people," she replied. "It was all of us, humans, Velorians, fighting side by side. We are in this together now." The Velorian leader smiled, his eyes filled with hope. "Then we are truly free, and we will never forget what you have done for us." As the humans and Velorians worked together to secure the remaining Vakar forces and begin the recovery process, the magnitude of the victory began to sink in. The city, though in ruins, was theirs once again, and for the first time in a long while, the skies above Veloria seemed a little bit brighter. But the victory was not without its challenges. The planet was in ruins, its infrastructure shattered by months of occupation and warfare. The Velorians had lost much, and the rebuilding process would take years. However, the humans had made sure to bring the necessary resources with them. They brought engineers, medics, and supplies, everything needed to help Veloria recover. "We'll get this planet back on its feet," General West said as she surveyed the destruction. "One step at a time." Over the next few weeks, the human and Velorian forces worked tirelessly to restore order to the planet. They cleared rubble, rebuilt homes, and repaired essential infrastructure. The human forces helped to establish safe zones for the Velorian people, ensuring that everyone had a place to live and food to eat. It wasn't easy. There were still pockets of Vakar resistance, and there were still dangers lurking in the shadows. But with every passing day, the Velorians grew stronger. They had learned to fight alongside the humans, and the two species had formed a bond that would last long after the last shot had been fired. For General West, the mission was over, but the work was just beginning. She had come to Veloria to end the war, and she had done that. But now she was staying to help the Velorians rebuild, to ensure that their freedom was lasting. There would be no more wars, no more suffering. One afternoon, as West stood looking out over the city, she was joined by Sergeant Emily Cross. The two women had fought together through some of the toughest battles Veloria had seen. Cross had been by West's side since the beginning, and together they had led the charge to free the planet. "You did good, General," Cross said, her voice filled with respect. West gave a tired smile. "We all did good, Sergeant, but the real work is still ahead." The two women stood in silence for a moment, watching as Velorians and humans worked side by side. The sun was setting over the horizon, casting a golden light over the ruined city. It was a beautiful sight, a symbol of the hope that had returned to the world. "We've changed this planet, Sergeant," West said quietly. "And in the process, we've changed the galaxy. The Vakar thought they could crush Veloria, that they could break the spirit of its people. But they didn't count on humanity. They didn't count on us." Cross nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "We're not just soldiers, General, we're a force, and we've proven that." West looked at her, her gaze steady. "The galaxy won't forget what we've done here. The Vakar have been defeated, but there will be others. There are always others, but now when anyone needs help, when anyone is oppressed, they'll know who to call." "And we'll be there," Cross said, her voice full of pride. West turned to face the horizon once more, her thoughts turning to the future. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had just made its mark on it. But the war for Veloria wasn't just about the planet. It was a statement. A declaration to every empire, every race, and every species that humanity would never stand idly by while the weak were crushed. The galaxy had underestimated humanity before, but now humanity had shown its true strength. As the days passed, General West stayed on Veloria, working alongside the Velorians and her soldiers. She knew that her time on the planet was coming to an end, but she was content. She had done what she set out to do. She had freed a planet, and in doing so, she had changed the course of the galaxy. The Velorians, with the help of the humans, began to rebuild their world. It was slow at first, but they worked together, their bond growing stronger with every passing day. The Velorian capital, once a war-torn city, slowly began to come back to life. Buildings were rebuilt, fields were replanted, and the sound of children's laughter began to fill the air once more. For General West, it was a bittersweet farewell. As she boarded the transport ship that would take her back to Earth, she took one last look at Veloria. She had left a part of herself behind on this planet, part of her heart, part of her soul. And though the war had ended, the journey was far from over. The galaxy had changed, and humanity had made its presence known. But there were still more battles to fight, more injustices to right. The Vakar had been defeated, but the universe was vast, and there would always be someone who needed saving. And humanity, led by people like General West, would be there to answer the call. As the ship ascended into the sky, General West stood at the window, looking out at the planet below. The battle for Veloria was over, but the war for justice, for freedom, and for the protection of the innocent was just beginning.